Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into the beautifully complex story of Ludwig Wittgenstein. We're talking about a guy who literally built the absolute perfect logical system, only to eventually tear the whole thing down with his own two hands, and then build something even better. It is an absolutely radical transformation.
I mean, think about it. What actually happens when a genius believes he has solved literally every philosophical problem in history and then realizes he was completely 100% wrong? This isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment, right? This is the actual, real-life dramatic arc of a man who changed the course of philosophy, not once, but twice. This was a guy who was heir to one of Europe's wealthiest families, gave away his entire fortune, and then tackled the absolute limits of human thought.
Now, you might have actually heard this famous absolute mic drop of a quote, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." That incredibly bold declaration really defined his early work. He basically drew a rigid structural boundary around everything that could be meaningfully said, and he declared that anything outside of it, stuff like ethics, aesthetics, or the meaning of life itself, was just simply beyond the reach of language.
Part 1. The Picture of Reality. Language as a Mirror.
Okay, so to really understand his early masterpiece, we have to look at a highly visual, tactile scene in a Parisian courtroom that he happened to read about in a newspaper. The case involved an automobile accident, and to help the jury actually visualize what happened, lawyers arranged these little toy cars and dolls on a table. And when Wittgenstein saw this, it hit him like a lightning bolt. He realized that just as those chunky little toy cars can physically represent a real-world courtroom accident, our sentences act as tiny models that share the exact logical structure of the real world.
So notice how this concept just locks everything into place. He called this the picture theory. And in this view, language isn't just a collection of random, arbitrary labels we slap onto things. No, language actually shares a literal, crystalline structural identity with the world around us. It's kind of like how a photograph represents a scene through spatial relationships. Our propositions represent facts through logical relationships.
He packaged this incredible, sweeping vision into a beautifully rigid system called the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. He honestly believed he had mapped language's logical scaffolding with mathematical precision, declaring that reality breaks down into simple, atomic facts, and our language breaks down into elementary propositions. And because he genuinely believed he had solved philosophy's fundamental problems permanently, well, he just confidently walked away from the academic world entirely to go be a rural schoolteacher in Austria.
Part 2. Breaking the Perfect System. A philosophical twist.
But here is where our narrative takes a really sharp turn. That perfect, solid, logical structure, it eventually began to crack under the weight of real human life. For nearly a decade, Wittgenstein lived as though philosophical questions didn't even exist anymore. He taught arithmetic and grammar to kids in these little mountain villages. But you know what? The sheer messiness of how those kids actually learned and used words started to seriously bother him. So, in 1929, he actually showed up completely unannounced at the door of the economist John Maynard Keynes in Cambridge, having realized that his brilliantly constructed system just couldn't handle the fluid reality of how everyday humans actually speak.
He discovered that statements about things like colors couldn't just be broken down into independent, atomic blocks like he previously thought. Think about it. If you say something is completely red, it logically cannot be blue at the exact same time, right? Well, these complex dependencies meant his foundational picture theory was fundamentally flawed. He admitted, "I was wrong." That beautiful crystalline structure had officially crumbled.
And this brilliantly illustrates the great divide in his life. He completely shifted from being this rigid architect of logical mirrors, where every single word had to perfectly picture an atomic fact, to becoming more of a therapist. He started to view language not as a mirror, but as a flexible set of tools woven directly into the daily, breathing activities of real human life.
Part 3. Meaning is just use. Language in action.
To really grasp this new phase, the absolute crucial point we have to unlearn is the deeply ingrained idea that words are just names for things. Instead, we have to look at how we actually put words to work in the real world. To explain this, he introduced this awesome concept of the language game. Imagine a builder shouting "slab" to an assistant, and the assistant immediately brings over a stone slab. The word slab in that specific moment isn't some descriptive picture of an object. It's a call to action. It's baked directly into their shared activity. The meaning of the word is literally just its use in the language.
Wittgenstein asked us to think of language like a literal toolbox. If you look inside a toolbox, you're going to see a hammer, pliers, a saw, maybe a glue pot. You would never look at those and ask, so what is the single essence of all these tools? I mean, they clearly do entirely different things. Well, language is exactly the same. We use it for giving commands, making jokes, praying, translating. Each of these is a totally different language game, operating under completely different rules for success. Like, a joke doesn't fail because it inaccurately describes reality. It fails if nobody laughs.
Which leads to his beautiful concept of family resemblance. If you try to find one single solid thing that all games have in common, from board games to Olympic sports, all the way to a kid just throwing a ball against a wall, you literally won't find it. What you will find is a crisscrossing web of resemblances. Just like members of a family might share a certain eye shape or maybe a similar laugh. Language games share overlapping similarities, but absolutely no single universal essence.
Part 4. The Beetle in the Box. Private language.
This builds into his next brilliant takedown, which directly targets the age-old assumption that our mental words, things like pain or joy, refer to private hidden objects floating around inside our heads. He asks us to imagine a pretty wild scenario. Suppose everyone has a little closed box, and everyone calls whatever is inside their box a beetle. But here's the catch. No one can ever look inside anyone else's box. People only know what a beetle is by looking at their own. Well, Wittgenstein points out that if the word beetle has a practical use in this group's language, it cannot be as the name of a private thing. The actual contents of the box could be constantly changing, or it could even be completely empty, and it wouldn't matter at all to how the word actually functions in public conversation.
What he's proving here is absolutely groundbreaking. Mental concepts like pain or joy are not just labels for hidden inner objects. When a little kid learns to say, "I am in pain," they aren't looking inward to label some secret private entity. Actually, they're learning a highly sophisticated, socially trained replacement for naturally crying out. Our mental words are public tools that we use to navigate our shared social lives.
Part 5. Escaping the Fly Bottle. The Therapeutic Method.
And this brings us to his ultimate therapeutic conclusion about what philosophy is actually supposed to do, and honestly, why so many of us get so incredibly confused. Wittgenstein famously wrote, "Philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language." He realized that traditional philosophers get hopelessly tangled up because they rip words right out of their natural working environments. They'll take a word like time or knowledge, remove it completely from the daily activities that give it sense, and force it to just idle in these abstract theories. As he brilliantly put it, philosophical confusion happens when language goes on holiday.
So the solution, then, is his therapeutic method. The goal isn't to build grand, sweeping theories of the universe. The goal is to patiently, carefully untie the knots in our thinking. He tells us, hey, don't think, but look. Look at how we already successfully use language every single day. We have to bring words back from this frictionless, abstract ice to the rough ground of ordinary life. Philosophy shouldn't try to change the world. It should leave everything exactly as it is and merely clear away our conceptual confusion.
He summarized his entire mission with one perfect metaphor. When asked about his aim in philosophy, he said, "To show the fly the way out of the fly bottle." A fly in a glass bottle batters itself against the invisible walls, trapped not by the bottle itself, but by its own frantic instincts, completely ignoring the open top. And I'll leave you with this provocative thought. When you find yourself agonizing over deep existential questions, are you really facing the profound mysteries of the universe? Or are you just a fly buzzing against the glass, confused by your own words?